It was Christmas Eve in Carnation, Washington. Inside the Anderson family home, the air was warm with the scent of pine and wrapping paper scattered across the table. Outside, the winter sky was fading, and the quiet country property sat tucked away behind a locked gate. By nightfall, the scene inside had changed. The tree still stood, lights glowing softly, but the living room told another story. The phone line had gone dead. Footsteps had stopped, and in the silence, the fate of 3 generations was sealed before anyone could call for help. What happened that night would leave a small community in shock and reveal a chain of events driven by resentment, betrayal, and something far darker. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Wayne Anderson, age 60, was a respected Boeing engineer who had built not only a long career but also a solid, loving marriage with his wife, Judy Anderson. Judy, 61, worked for the United States Postal Service and was equally admired in their close-knit community of Carnation, Washington. For 31 years, the couple had shared a life together, raising 3 children: Mary, Scott, and Michelle. Mary, their eldest daughter, lived quietly in North Bend. Their middle child, 32-year-old Scott Anderson, was married to 31-year-old Erica Mantle Anderson. The young couple were devoted parents to 2 children, Olivia, age 5, and Nathan, age 3. Living in Black Diamond, about 25 minutes from Wayne and Judy, Scott worked long hours in construction to provide for his family, while Erica dedicated herself to caring for the children full-time. The youngest of the Anderson children, 29-year-old Michelle Kristen Anderson, was a very different personality. She lived with her boyfriend, 29-year-old Joseph Thomas McEnroe, in Falls City. The two had first met in an online fantasy fiction chat room, quickly forming a bond that led them to move in together in 2004. Renting a mobile home, Michelle listed her job on the application as a night security guard for Nintendo, while Joseph stated he was employed at Target. Neighbors remembered the couple as strange and difficult to approach. Some noted they would avoid eye contact and react with hostility to the smallest perceived offenses, such as a car parking in their spot or a neighbor's pet straying into their yard. Michelle often called herself the black sheep of the family. She told others her relationship with her parents was volatile, claiming her father had hit her and that her mother was cold and unkind. Judy, however, worried about Michelle's life choices and regularly confided in her best friend, Linda, about her concerns. Judy made monthly trips to Michelle's home, always bringing food and necessities. Michelle claimed she had no desire to live on her parents' property, yet by 2007, she and Joseph had done exactly that, moving into a trailer on Wayne and Judy's land, rent-free. By Christmas Eve of 2007, tensions within the family remained largely unseen to outsiders. Wayne and Judy were hosting the holiday gathering at their Carnation home. Scott, Erica, and the children planned to arrive in the evening to share the festivities. But before the celebration could begin, Michelle and Joseph, already on the property, entered the main house around 4 p.m. One carried a revolver, the other, a handgun. Inside, Judy was busy wrapping presents in a back room. Joseph distracted her while Michelle confronted her father. Her attempt to shoot him failed. Whether due to a misfire or a missed shot remains uncertain. Joseph stepped in, raising his weapon and firing a fatal shot to Wayne's head. Michelle and Joseph then turned their attention to Judy, shooting her 3 times. The couple dragged both bodies to a shed behind the house, attempting to hide the evidence by covering blood with towels and rugs. Roughly an hour later, Scott, Erica, and the children arrived, unaware of the horror that had unfolded. They entered the living room, settling on the couch, when Michelle suddenly opened fire on her brother. Multiple rounds struck Scott, killing him where he sat. Erica was shot soon after, wounded but alive long enough to grab the cordless phone. At 5:13 p.m., she managed to dial 911 despite being hit 3 times, her children just feet away as the nightmare continued. Joseph McEnroe snatched the phone from Erica's hands, yanking out the batteries before hurling it violently against the wall. The sudden silence ended the desperate 911 call mid-sentence. Erica's pleas for mercy filled the room, but Joseph raised his weapon and fired a single fatal shot to her head. She collapsed instantly. The chaos did not end there. Joseph turned his attention to the children. 5-year-old Olivia was shot first, her life taken in an instant. Just moments later, 3-year-old Nathan, still small enough to believe in kindness, picked up the fallen phone batteries from the floor. In an innocent gesture, he reached out to hand them back to Joseph. Without hesitation, Joseph leveled the gun at the boy. Nathan was still clinging to his mother's chest when the shot rang out, killing him instantly. The 911 call Erica had made moments earlier had triggered a response from local deputies. At 5:45 p.m., law enforcement arrived at the Anderson property to investigate. Michelle, anticipating that the police might come, had already taken steps to keep them out. She locked the front gate at the end of the long driveway, blocking vehicle access. Without making any effort to enter the property or check on the occupants, the responding officers turned away, completely unaware of the massacre that had just taken place inside. 2 days later, on December 26, 2007, Judy Anderson failed to appear for her shift at the United States Post Office in Carnation. Her longtime friend and co-worker Linda called her home, but there was no answer. Alarmed, Linda decided to drive to the Anderson residence to check on her. When she arrived, she found the property's gate locked, just as the police had 2 days earlier. Unlike the deputies, Linda walked around the barrier, determined to reach the house. The front door was shut and she knocked repeatedly, calling out Judy's name. Receiving no response, she tried the door and was startled to find it unlocked. An unusual detail, as Judy was known to always keep her home secured. Pushing the door open, Linda stepped inside and called again. "Judy, it's Linda. We're worried about you." Silence filled the air. Then, looking down, she saw the body of a man lying motionless on the floor. At first, she thought perhaps he was unconscious from carbon monoxide poisoning and instinctively prepared to drag him outside. But as she stepped closer, horror gripped her. He had been shot in the head. As her eyes adjusted, Linda saw more victims lying nearby. Realizing the enormity of the situation, she rushed to call 911, her voice breaking as she reported, "There's been a murder. There are 3 people dead that I can see right now. There's a baby, and a man, and a woman, and she's my best friend." By 9:30 a.m., King County Sheriff's deputies had arrived. Inside the house, they found the bodies of Scott Anderson, his wife Erica, and their two children. Nathan was still pressed against his mother's chest, as if seeking safety in death, while Olivia lay beneath her mother's body. All four had been executed with gunshots to the head. A search of the property led investigators to a shed behind the house, where they discovered two more victims, Wayne and Judy Anderson. Like the others, both had been shot. Hours later, at approximately 11 a.m., Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe drove up to the crime scene. Detectives immediately noticed their unusual demeanor. Michelle introduced herself as Wayne and Judy's daughter, explaining that she lived in a trailer on the property. Neither she nor Joseph asked what had happened, why law enforcement was present in such numbers, or whether her family was safe. This lack of concern, amid yellow crime scene tape, a line of police vehicles, and a mobile command center, stood out sharply to investigators. Sensing that the pair were withholding information, detectives separated Michelle and Joseph for questioning. Both gave a strange explanation for their whereabouts on Christmas Eve, claiming they had set out to drive to Las Vegas to get married, but had gotten lost and decided to return home instead. In their initial account, Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe claimed that on the morning of Christmas Eve, they had gone to Michelle's parents, Wayne and Judy Anderson, to share happy news. They were planning to get married. They said Wayne and Judy had been delighted for them. But when investigators revisited their statements, the cracks in the story quickly appeared. Under pressure, both Michelle and Joseph admitted that this version of events was a fabrication they had agreed upon beforehand. Michelle's composure shattered. In a sudden outburst, she exclaimed, "What the hell have I done? I'm a monster." After waiving their constitutional rights, the pair gave full and lengthy confessions, admitting to the murders of all 6 members of the Anderson family. Michelle even took detectives to the location where she and Joseph had discarded one of the 2 firearms used in the killings. During her interrogation, Michelle made it clear that much of her anger had been directed toward her brother, Scott Anderson. She described how their relationship had once been close, but had deteriorated after he married Erica. She alleged that Scott owed her a significant sum of money, approximately $40,000, stemming from what she claimed were multiple loans given to him over the years, the most recent several years prior. Michelle expressed resentment toward her parents as well, claiming they refused to support her in the dispute with Scott. She believed they favored him and felt they had repeatedly slighted and mistreated her. Adding to her grievances was her anger over Wayne and Judy's request that she and Joseph begin paying rent for the trailer and the land they had been living on rent-free for over a year. When detectives asked why she had chosen to kill her entire family, Michelle's response was chilling. She said she was tired of everybody stepping on her and had decided that if her grievances were not resolved by December 24th, her plan was to eliminate them all. When pressed about the murders of Erica and the children, Michelle stated that she didn't want them living with the memory of what had happened and didn't want any witnesses. Joseph later told investigators that he had been the one to kill the children, explaining that Michelle had instructed him to do so because she could not bring herself to do it personally. They both repeated the claim that they did not want Olivia and Nathan to grow up with the trauma of witnessing their parents' deaths. With the confessions and the details of their motive established, the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office formally charged Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe on December 28, 2007, with 6 counts each of aggravated first-degree murder with a firearm. Despite their admissions, the legal process was slow and costly, dragging on for years. 10 months after the killings, In October 2008, the prosecutor announced he would seek the death penalty for both defendants. He cited the magnitude of the crimes, the murders spanning 3 generations, and the killing of 2 young children as factors that justified capital punishment. But this stance met resistance. The judge ruled against pursuing the death penalty, and the Washington governor later declared that no executions would take place while he was in office. Around this time, Michelle herself stated publicly that she wished to be executed. She described the decision as the hardest she had ever made, but one she felt was necessary to take responsibility for her actions. Years later, on September 5, 2013, the Washington State Supreme Court overturned the judge's ruling, reinstating the possibility of capital punishment. The prospect of execution appeared to change Michelle's stance. She withdrew her earlier statements and, with a new legal team in place, shifted her approach. Ultimately, both Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe would be tried separately, nearly 7.5 years after the Christmas Eve massacre. Joseph McEnroe's trial began in January 2015. His defense team presented him as a man coerced into murder by his then-girlfriend, Michelle Anderson. According to the defense, it was Michelle who had harbored the desire to see her family dead, and Joseph was merely a tool in carrying out her plan. Jurors listened to a recorded interview in which Michelle herself told a King County Sheriff's detective that the murders had been her idea from the very beginning. On the tape, she admitted that she had pushed Joseph into it, accepting full responsibility and saying she should have walked away. Joseph's attorneys argued that Michelle had molded him into what they called her attack dog, manipulating him from every possible angle until he agreed to kill. They claimed his mental health struggles, coupled with a fragile emotional state, had made him especially vulnerable to her influence. In court, Joseph's background was also brought under scrutiny. His aunt, Mary Turner, testified about his turbulent childhood, describing a mother who was both financially unstable and emotionally volatile. She alleged that Joseph had been beaten, verbally abused, and used as leverage in her attempts to extract money from her own parents. When testifying in his own defense, Joseph claimed that his decision to kill Olivia and Nathan Anderson was, in his view, a twisted act of mercy. Ending their lives, he insisted, was the only way to free them. He described their deaths as quick and painless, a statement that left the courtroom visibly shaken. On March 25, 2015, after weeks of testimony, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder, along with the associated firearm enhancements. Joseph's demeanor on the stand was peculiar. He appeared heavily medicated, often pausing, sighing, or struggling to find words. At moments, he seemed on the verge of tears. He admitted that thoughts of the murders haunted him constantly, lingering in his mind every day since that night. However, the senior deputy prosecutor accused Joseph of deliberately altering his behavior, even modifying his speech patterns and appearance, in a calculated attempt to draw sympathy from the jury. Joseph, for his part, expressed remorse, claiming he had taken the lives of people who had shown him nothing but kindness. He told the court that if there were any way to undo what he had done, to bring them back or ease the pain he had caused, he would do it without hesitation. During closing arguments, the prosecution urged the jury to impose the ultimate penalty, death. Addressing the panel, the senior deputy prosecutor told them that the punishment was both just and necessary. But the jurors could not reach a unanimous decision. 8 voted in favor of execution, while 4 opposed it. Without unanimity, Washington law required the court to impose the only remaining option: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On May 13, 2015, Joseph McEnroe was formally sentenced, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. 8 years after the murders, Michelle Anderson finally faced trial. Her proceedings began in January 2016, but the death penalty, initially a possibility, was taken off the table. The prosecutor explained that after two separate juries in recent capital cases, including McEnroe's, had declined to impose death sentences, it was no longer in the interest of justice to pursue it against Michelle. Given that she was considered equally culpable, her potential punishment would be aligned with Joseph's: life without parole. Throughout the trial, Michelle's demeanor fluctuated. At times she sat with her head lowered, appearing tearful, but she chose not to speak to the court directly. Her defense attorney claimed Michelle was deeply remorseful and had apologized to everyone affected. The prosecutor took a very different position, describing her motive as pure, unadulterated greed. In her first police interview, he noted, she had mentioned money over 35 times while explaining why she killed her family. Jurors heard recordings from that interview in which Michelle contradicted herself repeatedly. She shifted from calling herself a monster for killing her family to claiming her parents and brother had abused her for years. No credible evidence was ever presented to support her abuse allegations. In reality, those who knew Wayne, Judy, and Scott described them as warm, compassionate people. Erica and her children were equally blameless. Testimony revealed that Michelle harbored deep animosity toward Erica, believing she had driven a wedge between Michelle and Scott. Michelle's defense team called no witnesses. They cited years of difficulty working with her, noting her refusal to cooperate or even communicate with them. The courtroom, however, heard from the victims' family members. Erica's mother addressed Michelle directly, recalling that after being shot, Erica still managed to call 911, not just for herself, but to try to save her children. Michelle's sister, Mary Anderson, also spoke. Her voice heavy with grief, she told Michelle that she would have the rest of her life in prison to reflect on her actions. The judge commended the resilience of the secondary victims, family members, friends, first responders, and jurors, who had endured gruesome testimony and graphic crime scene images. He acknowledged their suffering, saying, "Even though you didn't do anything wrong, it's still your fault. You've all suffered tremendous losses. Fortunately, this lengthy chapter of your nightmare is almost over." As the proceedings drew to a close, Michelle erupted, shouting at the judge and accusing her court-appointed attorneys of lying to her. She said she wanted to leave jail temporarily to hire private counsel, but her request was denied. She placed blame squarely on the judge, claiming he was violating her rights. On March 4, 2016, Michelle Anderson was convicted of 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. On April 21st, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, matching the fate of her former boyfriend and co-defendant. With both trials concluded, the Anderson family finally saw justice served, though it came 8 years after the murders. The precise motive behind Michelle's actions may never be known, whether it was greed, jealousy, rage, or a combination of all three. What is certain is that two people bound by a toxic relationship destroyed 3 generations in a single night. Perhaps Michelle could not stand to see the happiness Scott had found with Erica, or the close-knit family they had built together. As for Joseph, his participation remains one of the case's most disturbing mysteries. With no clear personal motive, he still chose to take part, and even carried out the murders of the children. The tragedy remains devastating. Today, Joseph McEnroe serves his sentence at Washington State Penitentiary. Michelle Anderson is held at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. Neither will ever be released. And while justice was served in the legal sense, the wounds left by the Carnation murders will never fully heal. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.